Okay, I'm back.
That was fast.
What are we discussing today?
Article that I had given you. Go give people a few more minutes to collect themselves. Hello, someone has just joined us on the telephone. 0686. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Elise. I'm actually the new chaplain at Fireman. I'm just coming to listen
Awesome.
to your talk.
That's great. Elise, so nice to meet you, albeit virtually.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
And let's see, someone is. Okay. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank God. Thank God. All is good. So I think I'm expecting a few more. I think we're expecting a few more people, but we'll see what happens.
Rabbi, I have no idea how I got on here.
Well, I'm really happy you did, Jordan. This is very
I
exciting.
tried everything.
So excited that you're with us, and
Thank you.
And we're happy to see you.
it's
Thank
great
you.
to see your face. And I promise that I'll stop eating these chips in just a minute. I just didn't have any lunch, and so I'm
It's a healthy lunch.
yeah. Oh, I love sweet potato chips. I can't resist. And I actually have a salad, but I decided it would be, and is in addition to noisy, it would also be gross to eat salad in front of people. So a few chips I figure is okay, but I'll stop because they're so noisy.
Did everybody get the hard copy of today's discussion?
No.
No.
No, I read it online.
And I read it online too.
Good. Elaine, did you get the hard copy I sent you?
I didn't. I think I did.
I don't know if I did or not.
I asked Gail to bring it to you, but if that never happened, I'll check over here to see, maybe it just never went over there. I have to come by 15:50 later today anyway. So if it's still here, Elaine, I'll bring it so you can have a hard copy. And Elise, do you have a copy of it in front of you?
Is this a call?
You know where
My white friend asked something.
I'm sorry. Hold on one second, Elaine. I'm gonna Elise, I didn't hear you what you said.
No, I don't have it. Do you know where I'd be able to find it?
Yeah, I'll do you have are you calling on your cell phone?
Yes, but my computer's in front of me.
Oh, your computer's in front of you. Great. Okay, so I'm gonna start sharing this with people, and when I find it, I will be able to right thing to look for to search for it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
This is my white friend asked me on Facebook.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
That's the one. Did you get it after all?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's one.
I didn't read it though.
That's okay. You can read it now. All right. So Elise, it's if you go to yesmagazine.org
Okay.
and then search for the author's name. Excuse me, is Hutcherson, Hutcherson.
Can you say that again? Sorry, H-U-T.
Hold on one second.
You're flowing. I'm on with the rabbi.
All right. I just muted Joe because Florence is with him. And all right, so Hutcherson, Hutcherson. and the title of it is "My White Friend Asked Me." That's probably enough of the title.
Okay.
You'll find it. It's a long title. All right, so let's go here. Hi, I see Laura joined us. Hi, Laura. Oh, at least her name is here. Okay. All right. All right, so we will get started. So you can see on the screen, if you have a screen, you can see the title and you can see the picture of the author. It's a very interesting picture. She's sort of in a half silhouette. So half the sort of, if you sort of imagine a diagonal across a person's face, the sort of lower right hand is visible, and then as you move up, I don't know, anyway, left as you look at it, but anyway, just half of her face is in shadow, which I think is a very interesting portrait of her.
Very pretty woman.
What?
Very pretty woman.
Very, very. And the caption under the picture says, "Trust me, nobody is mad at you for being white. Nobody," which I think is really, really interesting, and I think a very important thing to remember about this. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I see someone that says a chat. All right, so Richard, you just anticipated me. Now that people are on, I'm going to mute everybody. So if you want to say something, I invite you to raise your hand. I ask you to do it electronically. So under participants, if you go to your menu, you'll see participants. If you press that, there should be an option for raising your hand. So please do that if you'd like to say something. If you are on a telephone, you can push *6, and that will be the equivalent. I will see that you've raised your hand. So that way we'll be able to have a conversation, but people will be able to hear, because it can get very funky with a lot of background noise. Okay.
Jim,
Yeah, Barbara.
I have no option. I can either mute or rename myself, so I'll have to raise my hand.
Oh, okay, so is that where if you go to where it says participants?
Yeah.
Oh, and if you push that, you don't get the raised hand thing?
Nope. All I get is mute or rename.
All right. Are you on a computer, Barbara,
Yes,
or are you on,
yes.
you're on a computer?
Yes, I have a little Chromebook.
Then I don't know.
Oh, wait, I beg your pardon. I
All
do
right.
have it. I do have.
But there, you just raise your hand. You just raise your hand. Perfect. All right, good deal. Lower it. I'm gonna mute you. There we go. Perfect. All right. So we'll get started, and thank you everybody for joining us in this conversation. A very important one for us to have. Okay. All right. So yesterday, I was tagged in a post by an old high school friend asking me and a few others a very public, direct question about white privilege and racism. I feel compelled not only to publish his query, but also my response to it, as it may be a helpful discourse for more than just a few folks on Facebook. I also just wanted to point out that this article is dated to 2017. So it's not a new article, but it just came to my attention as coincidence would have it on Facebook. A friend of mine posted it on Facebook. So it's new to me and probably new to you as well. All right. So here's this post. To all my Black or mixed race FB friends, I guess that's how we say Facebook, and the cool kids say Facebook. They don't say Facebook, they say FB. I must profess a blissful ignorance of this white privilege of which I'm apparently guilty of possessing. By not being able to fully put myself in the shoes of someone from a background, race, religion, gender, nationality, body type that differs from my own, makes me part of the problem, according to what I'm now hearing. Despite my treating everyone with respect, and humor my entire life, as far as I know, I'm somehow complicit in the misfortune of others. I'm not saying I'm colorblind, but whatever racism, sexism, otherism in my life experience have instilled in me stays within me and is not manifested in the way I treat others, which is not the case with far too many I know. So that I may be enlightened, can you please share with me some examples of institutional racism that have made an indelible mark upon you? If I am to understand this, I need people I know personally to show me how I'm missing what's going on. Personal examples only. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I only want to understand, and not from the media, but not from the media. I apologize if this comes off as crass or offends anyone. All right, so just, I think that his post is so interesting. I guess I would invite people to reflect on what do you hear in this post, and does this are these questions that you yourself may have had about this topic? Feel free to raise your hand. Go ahead, Barbara. Just be sure to when I do call on you, be sure to mute yourself, okay? Unmute yourself rather. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, when I first read this article, it occurred to me that it was very good for me because I have not had experience with poor Black people or any projects or any hoods or anything of that sort. This is directed at middle to upper class people. And I think that this man who wrote to her is pretty obviously middle to upper class, as is the author. So it really struck me. It was a very good way to start.
Yeah, great. Anyone else have a reaction to this, to what he writes? Because obviously there was something in what he wrote that compelled her to respond with the depth and length that she did. So if no one else has any reflections, I'll just share, sort of my my reflections, right? Which is that it's very easy to be, as he puts it, blissfully ignorant of this white privilege. I have a friend who recounted she gave a sermon, and she was recounting an experience she had as a teenager, when she had gone to some sort of social justice camp, and she had they did a program there that involved oh, sorry about that. That involved, I don't know why I'm doing this. Okay, there we go. They did an exercise where they had everyone line up and hold hands. And then they asked a series of questions that people would have, that people would step forward if they enjoyed certain privileges in their life, and they would step backwards if there were things that sort of stood in their way, so to speak. And she, as a white person at that point, Protestant, found herself in this very interesting position of facing forward, right, and then and really not even knowing how far behind her the other people in the room were. And so, that was a great metaphor for not being able to see, right? So she, in order to see some of the difference between her and her peers, she actually had to turn her body around and look. Whereas the people who had a less privileged upbringing, they could see just by looking forward. So it's not easy necessarily to see from our vantage point, or I should say my vantage point as a white person, right? It is important to ask these questions. Right. The other thing that I'm noticing here, though, right, is that there's a slight defensiveness or feeling of guilt already, right? That it's somehow his fault. And I think that that's also very common. And so I just wanted to point that out, that one of the reasons these conversations can be so difficult, right, is because there is a tendency for people to feel guilty and defensive as soon as they are able to see some of the stuff that they haven't been able to see before. I think these are typical reactions. And I would just sort of say, you know, that I think what she opens that up, you know, she opens this article, right, with nobody is mad at you for being a white person, right? That is not any kind of a problem, right? It's how you behave as a white person that makes the difference. All right, so I think we can get started. All right, so here's my response, right? And also just that he's so worried, right, that just asking the question is going to be insensitive or crass or offensive, right? And that sort of, I think, goes to show, right, how difficult it is to even initiate these conversations. All right, so here's the response. Hi, Jason. First off, I hope you don't mind that I've quoted your post and made it part of mine. I think the heart of what you've asked of your friends of color is extremely important. And I think my response needs much more space than as a reply on your feed. I truly thank you for wanting to understand what you are having a hard time understanding. Coincidentally, over the last few days, I have been thinking about sharing some of the incidents of prejudice/racism I've experienced in my lifetime. In fact, I just spoke with my sister Lessa about how to best do this yesterday, because I realized many of my friends, especially the white ones, have no idea what I've experienced and dealt with unless they were present and aware when it happened. There are two reasons for this, because not only as a human being do I suppress the painful and uncomfortable in an effort to make it go away, I was also taught within my community, and I was raised in the 70s and 80s, it's shifted somewhat now, and by society at large, not to make a fuss, to speak out or to rock the boat, to just deal with it, lest more trouble follow, which sadly it often does. And the second reason would be a fear of being questioned or dismissed with, are you sure that's what you heard? Or are you sure that's what they meant? And being angered and upset all over again by well-meaning but hurtful and essentially unsupportive responses. Just if you're in the mood to see some well-meaning but hurtful and unsupportive responses, you can always check out the book of Job for how Job's friends respond to his travails. And you can begin to get a sort of a sense of how not to respond in these situations. Okay. All right. So, so again, I'm glad you asked because I really want to answer. Okay. So very important, right? For this person, you can't generalize, right? But for this person, and I think the length of this post makes it clear, right? For this person, she is so happy that he wants to know, right? That he found a way to ask the question because she really wants to share these experiences, but she herself has been hesitant to do it for the reasons that she mentioned. Okay, but as I do, please know a few things first. Number one, this is not even close to the whole list. I'm cherry picking because none of us have all day. Two, I've been really lucky. Most of what I share below is mild compared to what others in my family and community have endured. Three, I'm going to go in chronological order so you might begin to glimpse the tonnage and why what many white folks might feel is a where did this all come from moment in society has been festering individually and collectively for the lifetime of pretty much every Black or brown person living in America today, regardless of wealth or opportunity. Right, so it's very interesting. I have a friend who's very active in anti-racism work, and she says it feels like this is one of these black sheep moments when all of a sudden things just begin to happen, and a lot of people try to figure out how did this happen, why now, and what and and it's easy to forget, right, how much this has been collecting over years and years and years and years. Okay. All right. Some of what I share covers sexism too. Intersectionality is another term I'm sure you've heard and want to put. Hold on. Sorry, everybody. Something's going on here. Okay. All right. Some of what I share covers sexism too. Intersectionality is another term I'm sure you've heard and want to put quotes around, but it's a real thing too, just like white privilege. But you've requested a focus on personal experiences with racism, so here it goes. All right, so we can get in the future, if people are interested, we can also cover this term of intersectionality, which is a very has a very interesting history. But again, we'll just focus on this right now. Number one, when I was 3, my family moved into an upper middle class, all white neighborhood. We had a big backyard, so my parents built a pool. Not the only pool in the block, but the only one neighborhood boys started throwing rocks into. White boys. One day, my mom ID'd one as the boy from across the street, went to his house, told his mother, and fortunately, his mother believed mine. My mom not only got an apology, but also had that boy jump in our pool and retrieve every single rock. No more rocks after that. Then mom even invited him to come over to swim sometime if he asked permission. Everyone became friends. This one has a happy ending because my mom was and is badass about matters like these. But I hope you can see that the white privilege in this situation is being able to move into a nice neighborhood and be accepted, not harassed, made to feel unwelcome or prone to acts of vandalism and hostility. All right. And again, I think what I'll say is that, I'll read through these. If something strikes you and you would like to make a comment about them, please feel free to raise your hand. Number 2, when my older sister was 5, a white boy named Mark called her an N-word after she beat him in a racist school. She didn't know what it meant, but in her gut, she knew it was bad. This was the first time I'd seen my father the kind of angry that has nowhere to go. I somehow understood it was because not only had some boy verbally assaulted his daughter and had gotten away with it, it had way too early introduced her and me to that term and the reality of what it meant. That some white people would be cruel and careless with Black people's feelings just because of our skin color or our achievement. If it's unclear in any way, the point here is that if you've never had a defining moment in your childhood or your life where you realize your skin color alone makes other people hate you, you have white privilege. Sophomore year of high school, I had Mr. Melrose for Algebra 2. Sometime within the first few weeks of class, he points out that I'm the only spook in the class. This is so difficult to read. This was meant to be funny. It wasn't. So I doubt it will surprise you. I was relieved when he took medical leave after suffering a heart attack and was replaced by a sub for the rest of the semester. The point is here, if you've never been the only one of your race in a class, at a party, on a job, etc., and or it's been pointed out in a quote unquote playful fashion by the authority figure in said situation, you have white privilege. When we started getting our college acceptances senior year, I remember some white male classmates were pissed that a Black classmate had gotten into UCLA while they didn't. They said that affirmative action had given him their spot, and it wasn't fair. An actual friend of theirs who'd worked his ass off. The point here is, if you've never been on the receiving end of the assumption that when you've achieved something, it's only because it was taken away from a white person who deserved it, then you have white privilege. When I got accepted to Harvard as a fellow AP student, you were witness to what an academic beast I was in high school. Yes? 3 separate times I encountered white strangers as I prepped for my maiden trip to Cambridge that rankle to this day. The first was the white doctor giving me a physical at Kaiser. Kaiser Permanente is a big health system. So I imagine that this means that she grew up in California. I don't know for sure. Me, I need to send an immunization report to my college so I can matriculate. Doctor, where are you going? Me, Harvard. Harvard. Doctor, you mean the one in Massachusetts? The second was in a store looking for supplies I needed from Harvard's suggested what to bring with you list. Store employee, where are you going? Me, Harvard. Store employee, you mean the one in Massachusetts? The third was at UPS, shipping off boxes of said what to bring to Harvard. I was in line behind a white boy mailing boxes to Princeton and in front of a white woman sending her child's boxes to wherever. Woman to the boy, what college are you going to? Boy, Princeton. Woman, congratulations. Woman to me, where are you sending your boxes? Me, Harvard. You mean the one in Massachusetts? I think, no, bitch, the one downtown next to the liquor store. But I say, gesturing to my labeled boxes, yes, the one in Cambridge. Then she says, congratulations, but it's too late. The point with an expletive attached. The point here is if no one has ever questioned your intellectual capabilities or attendance at an elite institution based solely on your skin color, you have white privilege. Plenty of people question my intellectual capacities to go to the places that I went, but it wasn't because of my skin color. All right, in my freshman college tutorial, our small group of 4 to 5 was assigned to read Thoreau, Emerson, Malcolm X, Joseph Conrad, Dreiser, etc. When it was the week to discuss the autobiography of Malcolm X, one white boy boldly claimed that he couldn't even get through it because he couldn't relate and didn't think he should be forced to read it. I don't remember the words I said, but I still remember the feeling. I think it's what doctors refer to as chandelier pain. As soon as a sensitive area on a patient is touched, they shoot through the roof. That's what I felt. I know I said something like my whole life I've had to read things that don't have anything to do with me or that I can relate to. But I find a way anyway, because that's what learning is about, trying to understand other people's perspectives. The point here is the canon of literature studied in the United States, as well as the majority of television and movies, have focused primarily on works or achievements of white men. So if you have never experienced or considered how damaging it could be to grow up without myriad role models and images in school that reflect you in your required reading material or in the mainstream media, you have white privilege. So number 7, all seniors at Harvard are invited to a fancy seated group lunch with our respective dorm masters. Yes, they were called masters up until this February when they changed it to faculty deans. But that's just a tasty little side dish to the main course of this remembrance. While we were being served by the Dunster House cafeteria staff, the black ladies from Haiti and Boston who ran the line daily, I still remember Jackie's kindness and warmth to this day. Master Sally mused out loud how proud they must be to be serving the nation's best and brightest. I don't know if they heard her, but I did, and it made me uncomfortable and sick. The point here is if you've never been blindsided when you are just trying to enjoy a meal by a well-paid faculty members patronizing and racist assumptions, patronizing and racist assumptions about how grateful Black people must be to be in their presence, you have white privilege. Okay. While I was writing on a television show in my 30s, my new white male boss, who had only known me for a few days, had unbeknownst to me told another writer on staff he thought I was conceited, didn't know as much as I thought I did, and didn't have the talent I thought I had. And what exactly had happened in those few days? I disagreed with the pitch where he suggested our lead female character carelessly leave a potholder on the stove, burning down her apartment. This character being a professional caterer. When what he said about me was revealed months later, by then he'd come to respect and rely on me. He apologized for prejudging me because I was a Black woman. I told him he was ignorant and clearly had a lot to learn. It was a good talk because he was remorseful and open. But the point here is if you've never been on the receiving end of a boss's prejudiced, uninformed, how dare she question my ideas bad-mouthing based solely on his ego and your race, you have white privilege. On my very first date with my now husband, I climbed, yes, you wanted to say something at 5904? What's your name?
I would like to comment on the paragraph before
Oh,
I
great.
pressed.
Sorry, Mary, that I
I-
didn't
I-
didn't notice your hand in time.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. No problem. I just have a very personal reaction to that paragraph. I have a few points I want to make, and I'll make them as quickly as possible. First of all, I have a 4-year-old Afro-American great nephew. And when he was born, my brother, who is the grandfather, said he will either grow up and have a great life, or he will be killed on the street.
Oh, gosh.
So I have a bit of a vested interest in all of this because of family members. But I am extremely grateful to this article, which she has written in such a thoughtful manner, because it has really made me look at it at different things and rethink things. So I'm very grateful you picked this article. I would also like to say that my father worked at Harvard for many years. I'm very proud of what he did, and I loved him dearly. But it was very much a white boys club for many years, and it was slow to change. So I can imagine this Black woman in this situation. I would also like to say, I think that paragraph is so devastating, because often when you go through college or your work life, as a woman, you do experience sexism, and I'm sure for Black women it was even worse. And you look toward other women who can be mentors towards you. And, you know, sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. But clearly, this master was not exactly a person who would be a good mentor for our writer. And what she said was just totally devastating. So I found it to be a very powerful paragraph.
Yeah. I found this paragraph to be especially powerful also because, it feels to me that everyone, would be offended. I mean, I don't know. I would be offended to hear what this person said. But the resonance that it must have had for this woman would only be so much more. So yeah, go ahead, Naomi. Thank you, Mary.
I'm thinking of an instance much more basic. Didn't happen here, happened in San Francisco. Black friend and I had gone to the Modern Art Museum. She was going to go back to her son's house in a fairly nice section of San Francisco. And she asked me to signal the taxi because she was afraid that if she signaled the taxi, it wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
You know, much more basic kind of thing, but still goes on in liberal.
So this is, trying to ride a taxi. I mean, and you see that even today in the unwillingness of certain rideshare drivers to go to particular neighborhoods.
Yeah.
They don't want to do it.
Well, it's one of the reasons that car service arose many, many, many years ago, because there were some neighborhoods in New York that drivers did not want to go into, and developed car service. But, all right, I'll shut up.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. All right, so on my very first date with my now husband, I climbed into his car, and this one really got me, I gotta say. And I saw baby wipes on the passenger side floor. He said he didn't have kids; they were just there to clean up messes in the car. I twisted to secure my seatbelt and saw a stuffed animal in the rear window. I gave him a look. He said, I promise I don't have kids. That's only there so I don't get stopped by the police. He then told me that when he drove home from work late at night, he was getting stopped by cops constantly because he was a black man in a luxury car. And they assumed that either it was stolen or he was a drug dealer. When he told a cop friend about this, Warren was told to put a stuffed animal in the rear window because it would change his profile to that of a family man, and he was much less likely to get stopped. The point here is, if you've never had to mask the fruits of your success with a floppy-eared stuffed bunny rabbit so you won't get harassed by the cops on the way home from your gainful employment, or never had a first date start this way, then you have white privilege. And 10. 6 years ago, I started a Facebook page that has grown into a website called Good Black News because I was shocked to find there were no sites dedicated solely to publishing the positive things Black people do. Let me explain here how biased the coverage of mainstream media is in case you don't already have a clue. As I curate, I can't tell you how often I have to swap out a story's photo to make it as positive as the content. Photos published of Black folks in mainstream media are very often sullen or angry looking, even when it's a positive story. I also have to alter headlines constantly to, one, include a person's name and not have it be just Black man wins settlement or Carnegie Hall gets first Black board member, or two, rephrase it from a subtle subjugator like ABC taps Viola Davis as series lead to Viola Davis lands lead on ABC show, as is done for, say, Jennifer Aniston or Steven Spielberg. I also receive a fair amount of highly offensive racist trolling. I don't even respond. I block and delete ASAP. The point here is, if you've never had to rewrite stories and headlines or swap photos while being trolled by racists, when all you're trying to do on a daily basis is promote positivity and share stories of hope and achievement and justice, you have white privilege. All right. Okay, Jason, there's more, but I'm exhausted and my kids need dinner. Remembering and reliving many of these moments has been a strain and a drain. And again, this ain't even the half or the worst of it. But I hope my experiences shed some light for you on how institutional and personal racism have affected the entire life of a friend of yours to whom you've only been respectful and kind. I hope what I've shared makes you realize it's not just strangers, but people you know and care for who have suffered and are suffering because we are excluded from the privilege you have not to be judged, questioned, or assaulted in any way because of your race. As to you being part of the problem, trust me, nobody is mad at you for being white. Nobody. Just like nobody should be mad at me for being Black or female or whatever. But what is being asked of you is to acknowledge that white privilege does exist, and not only to treat people of races that differ from yours with respect and humor, but also to stand up for fair treatment and justice. Not to let jokes or off-color comments by friends, coworkers, or family slide by without challenge, and to continually make an effort to put yourself in someone else's shoes, so we may all cherish and respect our unique and special contributions to society as much as we do our common ground. Okay, with much love and respect, Lori. All right, so I just noticed somebody on an iPhone has asked to speak. So please, first of all, you can unmute yourself, but just let us know who you are.
Virginia Sears.
Say it again?
Virginia Sears.
Oh, Virginia, so nice to have you. Great.
Thanks. I was raised in California. I survived the Watts riots out there. I was lived in an influential neighborhood, so definitely white privilege. Many years later, when my daughter was in high school, I worked with Project Self-Help and Awareness, which was a group of people formed to help Black families in Mississippi and to show them how they could get out of the mire that they were in. Well, part of that entailed when we took supplies, we took clothing and building materials, etc., down there. And we stayed with Black families in their homes. And believe me, I wouldn't want my dog living in some of those homes. And I was terrified the whole time I was there that white people who didn't like us because we were helping the Black population might come and burn their house down or whatever. I, for the first time in my life, felt what these people must feel their whole entire lives. And it was horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. I saw people, we went to one pharmacy and I tried to buy a roll of film and they tried to charge me 4 times as much as what I could get it anywhere else. And the guy justified it by saying, well, you know, they could get in their car and they could drive to another store. No, they couldn't, because most of them didn't have that privilege to be able to do that. I saw a lot of horrible stuff like that. And I can't imagine living your whole life feeling that way. And I feel bad, but now we need to know how to fix it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Virginia, for your very powerful recollections. My own experience was that when I was in college, I had a roommate who was African American, and so I started going to some of the activities of the campus's African American group, and it really was for me also incredibly eye-opening to have this experience of people talking candidly about what they were experiencing, and me just having no idea that there wasn't a term at that point, white privilege, but just beginning to sort of get the sense of like, oh my gosh, it is so difficult to be a Black person on this campus, and just having been completely oblivious to that previously. So yeah, I mean, it's always, I think, important to have those types of experiences if you can. I mean, obviously, if you don't have them, you don't have them. All right, other comments, experiences, things that really grabbed you about this essay. Go ahead, Naomi. You're muted, Naomi.
Yeah. I guess what bothers me is how basically with all of the headlines and all of the civil rights legislation and all of the stuff that's gone on since the 60s, back in the 60s and early 70s, there were groups called fair housing groups, which were attempting to help Black families buy houses in suburban locations. And we're in 2020 and it's still a problem.
Yeah.
It's so pervasive, I guess, that I don't know.
It's incredible.
Maybe the events of the last month will lead to some positive changes, but I don't know.
I mean, I certainly hope so. If the evidence of how many people are reading and learning, we have people on this call who are obviously very passionate about this issue, and many of you probably have been for a long time, but many of you, maybe this is something that's still kind of new to you. And I think the more people that become aware of this, that alone is progress. The deeper structural issues, of course, are very complicated, and they're baked in to our society. Right? The degree to which white people are able to maintain their wealth, and the difficulty with which Black families have in acquiring any kind of wealth dates back to the time of the founding of this country, when slavery was the sort of founding. That was how this country became so strong was on the backs of slaves. Go ahead, Barbara, and then Naomi, you can chime in.
Yes, on the recommendation of my daughter, I watched a documentary called The 13th, which was about the 13th Amendment. And it was the history of Black people in America. Probably a lot of people have seen it. It was harrowing. It was a reminder to me of a lot of the things that I'd honestly forgotten. And it was a revelation about the prison system and also what Bill Clinton did to further make it even more difficult for Black people. So it was quite an experience to watch that.
Yes.
I would recommend it highly to if anybody hasn't seen it.
The 13th. Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank
yes. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, go ahead, Naomi.
Yeah, just one final comment on my last comment. One of the people, I did not work with this, one of the people who was looking for housing in the suburbs happened to be a United States Senator.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that it drives you crazy, when, you realize that, I mean, I said this last week, that, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, how rich you are, if you have Black skin, you're likely to get stopped by the cops in a situation where someone with white skin is likely not to get stopped. And it's not always, it's not every time, but it's that sort of pervasive feeling of being at risk that I think is something that it's very difficult to sort of really fathom. So go ahead, Barbara, did you want to say something more? No, you're good? Okay. All right. All right, so please, other people who are interested in sharing their perspectives, please feel free to do so.
Hi, it's me, Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
I watched 2 films the other night, documentaries from American Experience. The first was on James Baldwin, 1964 in San Francisco. And he was so on because it was very difficult for the young Black people with whom he was speaking to get jobs, and the neighborhood in which they were living, they were moving the Blacks into a different area. And then last night I watched about Maya Angelou, also American Experience, and the horror of her life story, and so brilliant until she made it. Now, when we were married in 62, we're looking for a house, white, Jewish, in Parsippany is where we settled, but I found our house in the Jewish News, built by Holocaust survivors. It was advertised as 30% Jewish. They didn't want a ghetto, and no Blacks. That was 1964 is when we bought it. So we have a very long way to go.
Yeah. We sure do. We sure do. All right, so I invite any other responses. Go ahead, Sydney.
I want to, something that has always occurred to me, which is that white teenage delinquents do not seem to be impact how people feel about white adults, whereas Black teenage delinquents seem to impact how people view Black adults. And I believe this is a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed. And what can we do about that?
It's a great question. And, of course, I agree. I think that is sort of the definition of racism, right? That that there's sort of an assumption right? That one member of a group does something that everybody in that group is the same. And, you know, there is a little bit of, you know, there's the, you know, when Jewish people are, you know, when the whole thing happened with Bernie Madoff, you know, it was common for us at the JCRC where I was working at the time, the Jewish Community Relations Council. We were, you know, we would joke that Bernie Madoff was really bad for the Jews, you know, because it made the Jews look bad, as well as, you know, many major CJP donors where we got a lot of our funds were investors of his. So it was, you know, really was bad. But you know, Jews now can sort of say that in a kind of joking way, right? Or maybe less so now, right? As anti-Semitism has begun to make a resurgence. But that kind of response must happen all the time for Black people, because it's there was an article about how, you know, when white people riot, it's not necessarily called a riot, right? But when it's Black people, then it's definitely a riot. You know, it's just, you know, the way we talk about things shows right at a societal level how much prejudice there is. Go ahead, Renee.
Hello?
Yeah, I
Oh,
hear you.
it's the example you gave of being something so visual. I worked in a high school, and what we did was with these teenagers was a Title IX school, which meant that more than half the school was living in poverty. More than half the school were Black and brown students. And we would all line up in a room with all these students. There could be like 40 kids in a room. Step forward if you have a relative in jail. Step forward if you lost a peer to homicide within the past 6 months. When you start doing that with kids and they look at each other in that space, the power of that is incredible. I was so moved. And sometimes you would see the whole room move forward together when you somebody in jail. We did those exercises quite frequently to blend this group of kids together and form a community. The compassion that came from that was incredible.
Yeah, at the beginning of our time, Renee, I don't know if you're on the call yet. I described a sermon that a colleague of mine had given about that very kind of exercise.
Yeah.
And that was, for her, was this just amazing moment of, and as you said, it really builds compassion and understanding and alliances, right? I think that's what we really want to get to, right? We want to get to a place where people who have privileges, right, are able to be really effective allies for people who don't have the same privileges.
And we asked our faculty to participate in the same kind of activity. So we did it with faculty members only too.
Yeah.
Whatever we asked the kids to do, we did it as well.
Right, exactly. No, it's very, very powerful to do that. Anyone else want to make a comment? Go ahead, Mimi.
I have to unmute myself. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. I've been thinking a lot recently, I should say even more, about the ways that I and other white people think that our way is better, or that we are somehow better. And some kinds of comments that bring that out is, I was talking with someone who was talking about a Black person and was saying very nice things about this person, but said her grammar is so bad, as if the way white people's grammar is the grammar, and white people and Black people have a whole other way of speaking that is somehow less than. So there are so many examples of that. And yes, I think we need to think about white privilege, but we also have to think about the ways in which we think we're better.
I do think those two things work together, right? I think that the idea of sort of white supremacy, right? The idea that white people are somehow superior to other races, and white privilege go together, because if you don't have an understanding of white privilege, it's very easy to sort of fall into those traps. For instance, speaking about the capacity to speak standard English, right? Some of us have had quite a bit of education and quite a bit of opportunity to function in standard English, and then there's many of us who have not had that. So if beyond the sort of point that you're making, right, that language is a constantly evolving entity, and we can identify standard English as opposed to variant English, but we really should not talk about one version of it being better than another. That's a little silly. Then but if we can't even grasp the fact that those are differences that are not just from an individual's volition. There's whole structures that have ensured that that's the way that it is. But thank you, Mindy. That's really.
You're muted.
Virginia's not muted. Go ahead, Virginia.
Hi. In all of this that's been going on, my thought is I've worked with many races and many cultures in trying to help. And I don't want us to just focus on any one race. So, the Black race is being predominantly focused on, but I've had friends that are in Arizona and Nevada and of different cultures and races that are equally as put underfoot or underneath as the Black people. And we need to focus on all of them, not just one race.
Thank you, Virginia. Go ahead, Sydney. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Following up on that thought, I wonder whether when South Asians move into a neighborhood, has there been similar reactions to when middle class or upper middle class Blacks move into a neighborhood? Does anyone have an experience with that?
I mean, that you're raising, both of you raise very important points, right? And I do think that there is a fundamental difference, right, between Black people, or I should say African American people, right? Not just people with Black skin, with darker skin, but specifically African Americans. Although I do think that having dark skin, or having African background is still in our country synonymous with being inferior. And I think that stems, from the legacy of slavery. That people who look different than us, if we're in our neighborhood and someone moves in and they look different than us, right? That might be challenging, right? But I think it's a different thing when it's people who are African American, because there's such a sort of an article that I was reading today talked about how in the wake of the 13th Amendment, right, that there was eventually, pretty much it became very clear that most white people, whether they were in the South or in the North, were still committed to white supremacy, even if they were not committed to slavery. And so the rapprochement between white Southerners and white Northerners was eventually deemed more important than justice for the former slaves, which is among the reasons why we had the terrible system of Jim Crow and so on and so forth in the South, which we're still undoing that today, and we'll continue. Go ahead, Sandy. I can't hear you though. You got to unmute.
It's not only in the South. Let's take
absolutely 100%.
Hyde Park.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's in I have my PhD is from Yale, and there was a big to do about the name of the college down there was Calhoun College, right? Calhoun was a great white supremacist, and his name was on a college at Yale, and they eventually decided to change it. So it's definitely not just in the South, but there was obviously there's sort of explicit legal disabilities that were imposed on Black people in the South that were less in the North.
I'd like to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to say something about Brandeis. It was started 1948 because it was not so easy for Jews to get into schools like Yale and Harvard,
Right.
and so these uneducated men, because for the most part they were men who'd made money in business, said, screw it, we'll start our own. And that's what we did. And this past year we had 2 Nobel Prize winners and Anita Hill. So we did not badly.
Yeah.
No, I don't bow down to Harvard or
No.
Yale or Princeton, and I've sent children to all of them. But the fact is they think they're a whole lot better than they are.
Love it.
Go ahead, Naomi. You had your hand up. You're on mute though. Naomi, I can't hear you. Let me see if I can unmute. No. There you go.
Raising a fist in support of Brandeis, where Sandy and I were one class apart. But one thing that I had noticed back, maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was a recession in the 1980s and the real estate market was taking a very big hit. And a Black woman in our office was able to buy a house in a section of Boston that she would not normally have been able to buy a house in, simply because housing prices had gone to hell and the owner was desperate to sell. I don't know how many other Black people have been able to buy a house in this neighborhood. I suspect some. But every once in a while, something happens outside of race relations that leads to betterment.
Okay. Lois, thank you. I did not see your hand up, so I appreciate your text. Go ahead, Lois, and then we'll go back to Sydney.
I'm also from the New Haven area. And in the 30s and 40s, there's a good percentage of Jewish men that went to Yale. Both lawyers. And then they also were a group of men that were wealthy, that probably were able to afford to go there on scholarships. They were barred from different golf courses, so they established their own. And what I saw after that, trying to build up the relationships between Blacks and in high school, you felt like you were one. After school, they would go to the JCC to play basketball and bowling and things like that. But as soon as it became to go out with somebody for dating, it was stopped there. And those were my observations. I was there for Calhoun College too. Intermarrying, having mixed children is one way of taking care of the problem. Will it happen? Maybe not in our generation, but perhaps later on.
I think it's happening right now.
But not to a huge degree.
I do think that intermarriage has increased. We've seen
Of course.
population.
In the big cities, yes.
Right.
You would not move to in the outskirts.
It's obviously in rural and suburban areas, it's a little bit different. Sydney, did you want to say something?
Yes, I was thinking about another historical example. It's not one-to-one, but I was thinking about for many years the Japanese occupied Korea, and the Koreans were treated like serfs, and only after World War II were they liberated. And so, and now the Koreans are competitive against the Japanese. I thought that's an interesting historical example. It's not black and white, but it was master and slave, or slave-like. I wonder if does that give us any ammunition or any tools to use for righting the wrongs?
It's a good question, but I don't know the answer. Go ahead, Virginia. Yeah, you're muted though, Virginia.
He brings up a good point. I have the same thoughts myself. Can we learn anything from past experiences where cultures have been absorbed and have made it through successfully? I sat out here on the porch the other day and there was a black man sitting near me and he was crying. And I felt so bad because there wasn't really anything I could do to offer him solace. And I had a friend who is a good Jewish mom in New York, and she said to me, "Where was everyone? Why wasn't anyone rioting before the Holocaust?" You know, and she was crying, and there wasn't anything I could offer her either. And somehow we've got to change things, and I have no idea how.
You know, it is a very difficult thing. All right, so I realize we're past time, so I think Mimi wanted to say something and Naomi wanted to say something.
No, I'm good.
Okay, great.
Nope.
All right, so Naomi, you get the last word.
Just two very quick ones. Japan and Korea have been at each other's throats for 1,000 years. It just depended on which one had managed to win the last war. But I know I've made this comment before that one of the things that has happened to every group in America, the Italians, the Irish, the Jews, not quite yet to the Hispanics because they're a divided group, but the thing is that every group has become white. There's one group that has not been able to do this. And that's what I think we're wrestling with now. Every group that was initially discriminated against has acceded to white privilege over time. And the question is, how do we deal with this last group that has not managed to do that and can't? Amen.
Right, and a lot of the reason, right, a lot of the reason for that has to do with the legacy of slavery, because they were the only group that was enslaved, right? And unique in systems of slavery around the world, right? The slavery was based on skin color. If the person was black, then that person was presumed to be a slave, even if it was a free person. So it's a very, very, very deep set problem. But I think, what we can do to fight it is to continue to talk about it, continue to recognize it, continue to raise our voices when we have the opportunity to do so, and to really struggle to learn more and to be allies as much as we possibly can. So thank you all for joining this conversation. I look forward to learning with you again next week, and have a great rest of your day. There will be, if you're interested in the David story, we're going to be meeting tonight. For people, this batch of book arrived quickly, and then at 8:30 tonight there'll be a short evening meditation/prayer program with lots of music and poetry. So please feel free to join if you're interested. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was interesting.